The twin suns of Zarthex Prime blazed over the golden arena. Thousands of alien spectators filled the stands, their voices rising like thunder. They came to watch a public execution, not a battle. In the center stood a human, his hands tied. Eyes calm. His name was Commander Rain. He looked nothing like a warrior. No armor, no weapon, no backup. Just a plain gray jumpsuit and blood on his face from a guard's punch. Still, he stood tall, even when his knees trembled, high above. Queen Valera sat on her throne of fire steel, tall, proud, and ruthless. She ruled the Dralaxian Empire with an iron heart. She hated humans, calling them the weakest species in the galaxy. And today, she wanted to prove it. Bring out Karth. She commanded, her voice echoing across the arena. The crowd roared louder, chanting, "Karth, Karth," as the Queen's most feared warrior entered the arena. He was a monster of a being 8 feet tall, covered in bio-armor and scars. He held a battle axe longer than Rain's body. Rain looked at Karth and tilted his head. "You sure he's the warm-up?" He muttered with a smirk. The crowd laughed, thinking he was joking. The Queen narrowed her eyes, insulted by his confidence. "This human insulted our science, our honor, and our queen," the announcer shouted. "Let him feel what it means." To defy Dralax, the ropes were cut from Rain's wrists. He didn't run, didn't flinch. He just rolled his shoulders and stretched his neck like he was getting ready for a jog. Karth snarled, stepping forward, every footstep shaking the ground. "Any last words?" Karth growled, his voice like thunder. Rain smiled. "Yeah, don't blink," the gong sounded. And Karth charged, swinging the axe with all his power. But Rain moved like water, smooth and fast. He ducked under the swing, slid to the side, and kicked Karth's leg from below. The giant stumbled but didn't fall. Rain kept moving, dodging blow after blow. He never attacked, just observed. Watched Karth's breathing, timing, stance. The crowd's laughter faded into confusion. Why? Isn't he fighting back? Someone shouted, "Is he afraid?" But Queen Valera leaned forward, eyes narrowing. She saw it, the human wasn't afraid. He was learning, and he was fast, too fast. Then it happened. Karth raised his axe for a killing strike. Rain stepped in, grabbed Karth's arm, twisted it, and elbowed his throat in one smooth motion. The axe fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Rain used Karth's momentum against him, flipping the massive warrior over his shoulder. The entire arena gasped. As Karth landed hard, knocked out cold, silence fell. Rain stood over the body, calm, controlled. He bowed politely toward the Queen. "Your warrior is strong," Rain said, his voice firm. "But you underestimated a human." The Queen's face burned with anger and something else, curiosity. Who's this man? No human had ever done this. No human had ever walked out of the arena alive. The council members looked at each other, unsure of what came next. Punishment? Reward? Execution? Promotion? Rain looked up at the Queen again, his voice clear. "Your Majesty, I believe you owe me an apology." The crowd gasped. Even the guards froze. No one had ever dared to speak to the Queen like that. But Rain wasn't done. "I didn't come here to start a war," he said. "But if you want to see what humans are capable of, I suggest you keep watching." The Queen stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "Kneel," she ordered. Rain didn't move. "I don't kneel to tyrants," he replied. A deadly silence fell again. Then the Queen did something no one expected. She laughed, not a cruel laugh, but something more amused. "Very well," she said. "Let's see what to do with you." She turned to her council, her voice cold again. "For his crime and his victory, I assign the human a punishment worse than death." Rain raised an eyebrow. The crowd leaned in, breathless. "You shall marry me," the Queen declared. Gasps echoed across the arena. Even Rain blinked in confusion. "Wait, what?" he whispered, but the Queen was already walking away. Guards approached him, not to kill, but to escort, and just like that, the story of the humble human had taken a strange and powerful turn. A warrior defeated, a queen challenged, and a punishment that would shake the empire. The royal chamber doors slammed shut behind him. Rain stood in silence, surrounded by golden walls that pulsed with alien light. He wasn't in a cell, not in chains, no. He was in the Queen's private wing alone, confused and furious. Marriage? He muttered, pacing back and forth. That's her punishment. He'd expected death, maybe torture, maybe even forced labor, but this? This was madness moments ago. The entire arena had watched in shock. Queen Valeera had declared it loud and clear. For his crime and his victory, I assign the human a punishment worse than death. Her words still echoed in his ears. You shall marry me. Rain didn't know whether to laugh or scream. He wasn't here to fall in love. He was a scout captain, stranded after a deep space ambush, captured, humiliated, and now engaged to an alien queen. The doors opened again with a hiss. A tall, thin alien advisor entered, holding a tablet and a nervous look. You are to begin royal bonding rituals immediately, the advisor said, avoiding eye contact. Rain crossed his arms. Is this a joke? No, human, the advisor replied. This is law, in the throne hall. The queen stood in front of the Galactic Council. Her generals, nobles, and war ministers all stared in disbelief. She's marrying a human, one whispered. She's gone mad, another hissed. But Valeera raised her hand, silencing them all. I am not a fool, she said, her voice calm and cold. This human defeated our strongest warrior in front of the Empire. We either make him ours, she continued, or someone else will. Whispers turned to silence. They knew she was right. If Rain returned to Earth, his knowledge of their systems, their tactics, he'd become a living weapon. Better to keep him close, even if it meant sharing power. Back in his room, Rain stared at the ceremonial robes laid on the table. Dark crimson and silver, symbols of the royal line. Stitched into the sleeves, he touched the fabric and frowned. This isn't just a punishment, he said softly. This is a test. Later that night, the bonding ceremony began. Hundreds gathered in the crystal garden, where glowing trees lit the night sky. Rain stood beside the queen, dressed in royal colors, but still clearly an outsider. She didn't look at him. He didn't bow. The high priest spoke in ancient Dralaxian tongue. The queen repeated the words, her voice firm and proud. Then it was Rain's turn. He didn't follow the script. Instead, he turned to her and said, I don't belong here, and you know that. But if you think I'll just play your game, think again. Gasps rose from the guests. The queen smiled faintly. Not out of kindness, but interest. You speak like a warrior, she whispered. Good. As the ritual ended, firelight flickered in her eyes. The game has begun, she said under her breath, and I never lose. That night, Rain wasn't sent to a separate chamber. He was placed in a guarded room inside the queen's private tower. No windows, only scanners and sealed doors. He was a guest and a prisoner, but he didn't sleep. He walked to the center of the room and knelt, placing a small metallic chip on the floor. The chip blinked blue, and a tiny hologram appeared. It was Earth Tech classified and hidden in his belt since capture. Commander's log, he whispered. If anyone hears this, I'm alive, and I've just been married to the enemy. But something deeper is happening here. This queen. She's not just power-hungry. She's planning something bigger. Suddenly, he heard the lock beep. Rain quickly shut the hologram and stood up. The door slid open, revealing a figure in shadows. Not the queen, not a guard. Someone else. You're not safe here, human, the voice said. They think you're her pet. But you're a threat to the throne. Rain stepped forward, eyes sharp. Who are you? The figure stepped into the light, a royal handmaid with a hidden blade. I'm your only ally, she said. For now. The queen watched from a hidden screen, arms crossed. She had expected him to panic, to run, to submit, but he didn't. He adapted, and that made him dangerous. She whispered to herself, this is not a marriage. This is war. The palace was beautiful from the outside, but inside, it breathed like a living thing. Cold and full of secrets, walls whispered, floors shifted, and cameras blinked even when turned off. It wasn't just a palace, it was a trap wrapped in gold. Rain walked through its halls like a soldier in enemy territory. Every turn felt like a test. Every glance from the servants, every silence from the guards, felt loaded with hidden messages. He had survived the arena, the queen's command, and a forced marriage, but this place? It was trying to swallow him alive. 3 days had passed since the bonding ceremony. 3 days of being watched, studied, and kept away from any real power. He wasn't given access to the armory, war council, or strategy chambers, only escorted. Walks, empty dinners, and scripted conversations. The queen played polite. She smiled at official events and sat beside him during meals. But behind her eyes was a storm like she was waiting for him to slip. And everyone else in the palace? They wanted him gone. The nobles whispered behind his back. The generals ignored his presence. And the palace AI locked him out of systems, even though he had royal clearance. Something was wrong. Very wrong then. On the 4th night, something changed. Rain was invited to the war room alone. No guards, no queen. Just a message delivered by a silent drone. Midnight, Sector Hall 7. Door will open once, it read. He arrived on time, cautious but curious. The hallway lights flickered. Strangely, as he walked, when the door opened, he saw nothing, just an empty room and a small black chair in the center. He stepped inside. The door slammed shut. Then everything went dark. A second later, the floor beneath him opened. Rain fell 10 feet straight down, landing hard on a metal platform. The lights snapped on. Dozens of red lasers formed a deadly grid around him. A mechanical voice spoke from the ceiling. Welcome, human, to the royal test chamber. This challenge was created for those who wish to prove their worth to the Empire. Rain frowned. Wasn't the arena enough? No, the voice replied. This is where real decisions are made. He had no time to argue. The first trap-activated metal spikes shot up, forcing him to jump sideways. Then a laser beam sliced through the air where he had been standing. Rain rolled under the next trap, dodged a collapsing wall, and ducked beneath a swinging blade. He was fast but not perfect, his arm grazed by heat, his shirt torn by steel. For 10 minutes. He moved like a machine, reacting, calculating, adapting. His training kicked in. This wasn't about muscles, it was about brains, instinct, and experience. By the end, he stood in the center of the chamber, bruised but alive. The lights dimmed. The lasers disappeared. A door opened silently, revealing the queen. Standing in the shadows. Congratulations, she said, her voice unreadable. You're the first consort to survive the trial room. Rain looked at her, blood on his cheek, sweat dripping down his neck. Was that your way of saying goodnight? He asked dryly. Valera tilted her head. That was a warning. Trust no one in this palace, including me. She turned to leave but paused. You think the arena was your test, she said, not looking back, but the real game is played. In silence, behind walls and under smiles. As she walked away, her cape flowing like shadow, Rain was left alone again. But now he understood. This wasn't just a marriage of politics or power. This was survival in a house full of enemies. Later that night, Rain sat alone in his chamber. He opened a secret panel on the wall, a hidden space he had found while pretending to sleep. Inside, he found what he feared. Cameras that weren't supposed to be there, a broken communicator, still warm, and a badge belonging to the queen's former consort. Long thought dead, Rain stared at the item in his hand. The pieces were coming together. This palace had a history of secrets, and maybe, just maybe, the queen didn't expect him to live long enough to uncover them. But she had made one mistake. She underestimated a human again, and this time, he wasn't just fighting to survive. He was hunting for the truth. Asterisk, the queen didn't sleep at night. She wandered the ancient halls of the palace barefoot, wearing no crown, no armor, no mask. Here, in the oldest part of the empire, where no guards followed and no cameras worked, she became someone else, Not Queen Valera the Conqueror. Just Valera, the orphan of the Red Moons. A hidden room waited at the end of the hallway. The door opened. Only by her voice, inside, holograms flickered quietly, memories trapped in glowing blue light. And in every one of them, there was a little girl. The girl had large violet eyes and a scar across her forehead. She wasn't wearing royal robes. She wore earth clothes, old, torn, human-made. She was Valera, long before the crown, and beside her, holding her hand, was a human woman. Outside that room, Rain stood silently. He had followed her trail, not out of anger, but curiosity. He had seen a strange pattern in her schedule. She vanished every 7th night, always for 1 hour, always to the West Wing. He didn't expect to find her here, and he didn't expect to hear her cry. Valera touched the hologram gently. "I hated them for leaving me," she whispered. "I hated them for dying." Rain stepped into the light. "I thought you hated humans," he said softly. The queen spun, startled, eyes wide for the first time since he met her. But she didn't yell, didn't order him out. Instead, she turned back to the hologram. "I don't hate your people," she said after a pause. "I hate the war that made me lose mine." Rain walked closer, looking at the image of the human woman. "She was your mother?" Valera nodded slowly. "Adoptive," she said. "But yes." Rain stayed quiet. He knew better than to speak during someone else's grief. "She was a medical officer on a crashed Earthship." Valera explained. "My people found her dying. But she saved me first. She hid me, protected me, raised me when the world around us burned." Rain listened, feeling the weight in her voice. "So what happened?" he asked. "The rescue ships came," she said. "But not from Earth, from the enemy. They took me in, but left her behind. On purpose?" "Of course," she replied coldly. "She was a human." Rain exhaled slowly. "That's why you built this empire," he said. "Not to rule, but to never be powerless again." She looked at him sharply, surprised by how close he had come to the truth. "Yes," she whispered. "Power keeps people alive." Rain sat on the floor beside her. "Ignoring rank, title, or danger, or it isolates them," he said. "Sometimes power keeps people alone." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Two people born on opposite sides of a galaxy. Two orphans shaped by war, wearing armor made of pain. The silence broke when the alarm rang across the palace. A red light blinked across the holograms. The AI voice cut through the stillness. "Unknown ship detected in outer orbit. Entering restricted zone." Valera stood up immediately, her eyes returning to steel. "All commanders to the war chamber," the voice echoed. Rain rose beside her. "I want to go with you," he said. Valera paused, looked into his eyes, and nodded. "You're not just a consort anymore," she replied. "You're part of this war now." As they walked out together, something had shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but understanding, and in a palace full of traps, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The stars were on fire. Dozens of explosions lit up the void like angry suns. Warships screamed across Sector 9. Locked in deadly orbit above the ice planet Urex, the Queen's fleet was outnumbered. Her generals were panicking, and Commander Rain stood at the edge of the battle map, calm, watching, calculating. This wasn't a surprise attack. This was a message. The enemy wasn't just here to fight. They were here to destroy the Dralaxian throne, and they knew the Queen had grown weak in the eyes of her own people. But Rain didn't care about politics. He cared about patterns. And something in this attack didn't fit. "They're drawing you in," he said, tapping the map. "The outer ships, they're faking weakness to bait your fleet into the center, General." Tovar scoffed. "You're a human, not a tactician." Rain turned to him slowly. "I was commanding deep space squadrons while you were still polishing boots," he said coldly. "Now shut up and listen." The Queen raised her hand, silencing the room. Rain pointed to the eastern flank. "The zone Sector K has been completely quiet," he said. "Too quiet. They've hidden cloaked ships there." "How do you know?" the Queen asked. "Because that's what I would do," Rain replied. And because they're using Earth tactics, everyone froze. The word Earth still carried weight. Fear, respect, envy, and suspicion all tangled into one. Valeera narrowed her eyes. "Prepare counter-strike missiles in Sector K," she ordered. "If he's wrong, he dies." Rain didn't flinch. "If I'm wrong, we all die," he replied. Seconds later, the command was given. Dozens of missiles shot into empty space, and then, boom! Cloaked enemy ships exploded in fire and static. The room erupted in gasps. Rain didn't celebrate. He leaned over the map, tracking new movements. "They'll shift to close range next," he muttered. "Scramble the iron talons and bring the cruisers around their left. Box them in, force them to retreat." The Queen stared at him. This wasn't luck. This was control, precision. Human intelligence turned into warcraft. Within minutes, the tide of battle shifted. The Queen's fleet, once surrounded, now moved like a spear, cutting through enemy lines. Rain's plan worked, and across the stars, enemies began to fall, but then something unexpected happened. A transmission broke through the comms. A voice cold, metallic, and full of venom. "Congratulations, Queen Valeera," it said. "You've just made your greatest mistake." The room went silent. The Queen stepped forward. "Identify yourself," she commanded. The voice chuckled. "I am the prophet of Ash," it replied. "And your human has doomed you all." Suddenly, a new fleet entered the system. Not from the north, not from the south, from within. From a hidden base on one of the Queen's own moons. A betrayal, an inside job, the Queen's. Eyes widened. How did they get that close? She demanded. Rain stepped back from the map, deep in thought. "There's a spy in your palace," he said. "And they've been feeding your enemies information for weeks." The Queen clenched her fists. "Who?" she whispered. Rain looked at her. "We'll find out after we survive this," he said. "But first, we win this battle." As the second wave of ships moved in, Rain requested control of the tactical board. The Queen nodded, stepping aside. He issued rapid-fire commands to the fleet, redirected energy shields, rerouted fire zones, and triggered asteroid traps placed weeks ago by Dralak's engineers. Within 20 minutes, the second enemy fleet fell into chaos. They hadn't expected the humans to think like machines and move like ghosts. By the end of the hour, the battlefield was quiet. The stars were smoking ruins, and the Queen's throne still stood. Later that night, back in the war chamber, she stood facing Rain. "You saved my empire," she said, her voice softer than usual. Rain looked at her without smiling. "No," he said, "I bought you time." She nodded slowly. "Then let's use it wisely," she whispered. "But remember this, my enemies may fear me, but they hate you more." Rain stepped closer. "Let them hate," he replied. "I'm not here for peace. I'm here for victory, and far away." In the dark corners of the Empire, the traitor listened, watched their screens and whispered, "The human won today, but soon he'll lose everything." Asterisk silence had never felt this heavy, not on the battlefield, not in chains, not even in the arena. But now, standing alone in the Queen's private chamber, Rain felt it pressing against his chest. Something was wrong. The room smelled of ash. The guards were missing. The door behind him had locked without a sound. He stepped forward slowly, scanning the walls. Then he saw her crown, lying on the table, blood on its edge. No message, no alarm, no explanation. Just the symbol of power dropped like trash. Suddenly, a sharp pain struck the back of his neck. He collapsed instantly, vision spinning. From behind, shadowed figures stepped out. Palace guards, but not loyal ones. "Secure the traitor," one of them growled. By order of High Minister Kellen. Rain tried to move, but his limbs were numb. The drug was fast, cold, merciless. They dragged him out like a thief. Hours passed, he didn't know how many. When he woke, he was no longer in the palace. He was deep underground, in a prison with no light, no windows, no hope. A voice echoed from above. "You were never one of us, human, High Minister Kellen." stood behind a force field, hands behind his back. Your presence broke the queen's balance, he said. You made her weak. Rain coughed and sat up slowly. I made her see, he replied. Kellen frowned. That was your mistake, meanwhile. Far above, Queen Valera awoke in a med bay, her vision blurry, pain in her ribs. She'd been attacked, poisoned at dinner by someone she trusted. The healer leaned over her. You were nearly killed, he said. But you will recover. She tried to rise but collapsed. Where's Rain? She asked. The healer hesitated. He's gone, Your Majesty. The queen froze. Gone? Kellen declared him a traitor while you were unconscious, he explained. He was taken to the black cells. Valera's heart pounded with a feeling she hadn't known since childhood fear. Not for herself, for him. She stood up, ripping off the wires and tubes. No one touches him, she whispered. Not unless they want war. Back in the prison, Rain stared at the wall across from him. Numbers were scratched into the surface dates. Maybe one mark caught his eye. A small Earth symbol burned in. Hidden deep, someone had been here before. He moved closer, chipped away at the stone. Inside, wrapped in foil, was a tiny cum chip. He pressed it to his temple, and a voice whispered in his ear. If you're reading this, you're in the same hell I was. This is Commander Ali's Dorn, Earth Special Ops. There's a way out, but it comes with a price. Before he could finish listening, footsteps echoed in the hall. Kellen returned, holding a data tablet. We intercepted your Earth signal, he said. Do you really think you're the first spy we've caught? Rain smiled despite the pain. I'm not a spy, he said. I'm a mirror. You just don't like what you see. Kellen's eyes narrowed. Enjoy your last sunset. Human, he said. There won't be another, but far above. Queen Valera had changed her armor, not ceremonial, not royal war armor. Old and scarred, she stormed into the council chamber. Hair unbound, eyes full of rage. You tried to kill me, she said calmly. And you framed the only man who warned me. The ministers looked at one another, unsure of what to say. But she wasn't asking, she was declaring. I revoke your ranks, your lands, your titles, she said. You are no longer my counsel. Kellen stepped forward to protest. She drew her blade and placed it against his throat. Release the human, she commanded, or I burn this palace to the ground. Kellen's hands shook. He had underestimated her heart. He thought love was weakness, but this wasn't love. This was fury wrapped in loyalty. In the depths of the prison, alarms began to ring. Doors unlocked. Red lights flashing. Rain stood, hearing the distant sound of soldiers fighting. And then, she arrived, Queen Valera, with smoke in her hair and fire in her eyes. Come with me, she said. Breaking his cuffs, Rain looked at her, surprised. You came alone? She smirked. I brought a sword. And behind them, the tower fell, not just bricks and fire, but the old ways, the old lies, and the last pieces of who they were before they met. The palace was burning behind them. Smoke curled into the alien sky. Black against the twin moons, Rain and Valera stood at the edge of the cliff, side by side, covered in blood, ash, and silence. They weren't running. They were watching an empire fall. Moments earlier, Valera had driven her blade through High Minister Kellen's heart. Not in anger, but in justice. She had faced her council with fire in her voice and no crown on her head. I don't need a throne to rule, she had said. I only need the truth. Now every loyalist, every rebel, every outsider had turned their eyes to her, some in fear, some in awe. But none dared to speak as she reached for Rain's hand, and he didn't pull away, far beyond the hills. Enemy fleets gathered again. News of Kellen's death had already spread. All the warlords who had once bowed to the queen now saw a chance to strike. They didn't know what had changed. They didn't know what she had become. Rain walked into the war room. Now half destroyed, systems failing, he activated the last working holomap. Our defenses are thin, he said. We have 12 hours before they reach orbit. Valera stood behind him, placing her armored hand on the table. Then we give them a welcome they'll never forget." She replied, "The final battle wasn't about land, gold, or power. It was about who deserved to lead, those who ruled through fear, or those who stood even when they had nothing left to gain." As fleets clashed in the sky and fire rained across the capital, Rain led the counterattack. He piloted the flagship himself, weaving between destroyers and blocking EMP strikes with ancient earth tricks. The enemy didn't know how to read his moves. They didn't understand human chaos, and that was their mistake. Meanwhile, on the ground, Valera rallied the civilians. She opened the royal vaults, armed the people, and stood with them in the streets. She was no longer just their queen. She was one of them. The battle lasted for hours, and in the end, the enemy retreated. Broken and scattered, Rain crash-landed near the palace ruins, bleeding and exhausted, but when he looked up, she was there, reaching down for him, just like she had in the prison. "You came back," he whispered. "I never left," she answered. Weeks passed. The palace was rebuilt, smaller, stronger, open to all species. For the first time in history, humans were welcomed into the heart of the Dralax Empire. And it wasn't because of war. It was because of one man who refused to bow, and one queen who refused to break. The coronation hall echoed with soft music, but there was no crown this time, just two hands joined under a twin-star sky. Rain wore no uniform. Valera wore no armor. They stood before the galaxy, not as conqueror and consort, but as equals. The minister read the final line of the Unity Oath. "Do you, Queen Valera of the Dralax Empire, accept Reign of Earth, not as partner?" She didn't blink. "I do," she said, and this time, her voice shook not with fear, but with feeling. Rain smiled. "Then I guess it's your turn to suffer." He joked. The crowd laughed. Even she laughed, but in her heart, she knew. This wasn't suffering. This was peace. After everything, blood, betrayal, survival, she had found the one thing no war could give. A reason to stop fighting. And somewhere in the stars, old enemies watched and whispered, "The queen has changed." "No," another voice answered. "She finally became who she was meant to be."